I would just encourage Prime Minister Carney to do what he thinks is best for the Canadian people, not his own virtue signaling.
And this was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent ripping into Mark Carney once again. But this time it got personal. But you know what? I agree with him. My name is Nico Lagan, and I'm too conservative for the conservatives. My co-host, Rob Ambrose, not woke enough for the liberals. We are the political orphans. As you can see, my co-host is not here. He's having some microphone issues. Just texted me. So you are stuck with me for the full hour. But luckily for you, we do have a guest coming in at 7:30. We'll keep that a surprise, but we will talk about it later. But let's get to the most trending topic of the day, the comments of U.S. Secretary Scott Bessent. He is not letting that one go, but I actually have a solution. There is something that we could do to fix the problem and see who the liar is. But before we address the solution, let's talk about what Scott Bessent said today to Mark Carney, and it really got personal. So listen to this.
You've got a bit of a rift there lately, and there's different accounts between you and Prime Minister Mark Carney about that call this week post Davos with President Trump. He says that he dug in and reinforced the message. You said that he walked it back.
I was on the call. Prime Minister Carney, in my investment career, I've seen what happens when a technocrat tries to pivot and become a politician. It never really works out well. So I would just encourage Prime Minister Carney to do what he thinks is best for the Canadian people, not his own virtue signaling, because we do have a USMCA negotiation coming up. And he rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump message. And that's not a great place to be when you're negotiating with an economy that is multiple larger than you are and your biggest trading partner. In the end, I think we will end up in a good place. It may not be a straight line.
Are you saying that they will face consequences in these trade negotiations, reopening the USMCA?
I am saying that I would not pick a fight going into USMCA to score some cheap political points. Either you are working for your own political career or you're working for the Canadian people.
I cannot stop myself from laughing at this because he is 100% right in everything that he said. Yes, Trevor, we're going to take your comment afterwards because the more this continues, the more I have to agree with you. But let's do a quick summary of what he said. He basically told Carney to do what's best for Canada and not his own virtue signaling. Is there somebody out there with any type of common sense that can disagree with that? I know I can't. I know you guys can't. But is there somebody out there listening to this that can disagree with that statement? Do what's best for Canada and leave your virtue signaling alone. Then he said that Carney rose to power on an anti-Trump message. Again, can we disagree with that? Because he did. They have a whole movement called Elbows Up, which is meant to stand up to Trump. So absolutely right on that one too. Then he said that talking about the USMCA, that we will end up in a good place, but it's not going to be a straight line. So obviously Scott Bessent recognizes that the US does need Canada. Not the way that Canada needs the US, let's be honest here. But he does know that we need a deal. They definitely want a deal. So obviously we're going to have a deal, but it's not going to be too good for Canada, I got a feeling. But we'll see. I think July 1st, if I remember correctly, is when the negotiations are starting again. It's either June 1st or July 1st. Then he said that he shouldn't, talking about, and we're talking about Scott Bessent talking about Carney, he said that don't pick a fight going into USMCA. Again, Can you disagree with that? Do you? I was in business for a very long time. Like I worked for some of the biggest companies, the telecommunication companies in Canada and the US. And you know what? Sorry, the biggest telecommunication companies in Canada dealing with some of the biggest customers in the US and Canada. And you know what? You don't go into a negotiation trying to insult or insulting your biggest customer. You don't do that, because guess what? They're not going to do business with you. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And that's exactly what Scott Bessent is saying. Just don't go into a fight, or don't go into a negotiation trying to start a fight, because that's basically what he's doing. Then you should work for Canadians instead of your own political career. And as I saw in the comments, I couldn't agree with that more, because that is exactly what came up to mind when I saw that this morning. Is don't work for your political career or Brookfield, because we all know that he's working for Brookfield, and his own political career is to further the interests of Brookfield and the New World Order. Like, those are words that he uses. They're not just me using those words. Those are his own words. But as I was thinking about this today, there is a solution to this. We could fix this problem right now if they wanted to. If Mark Carney really wanted to prove that he never backed down from his comments in Davos, because that's where it started, right? It all started with Scott Bessent 2 days ago saying that, either yesterday or 2 days ago, saying that he was in the Oval Office with Trump when Mark Carney called, and he was walking back his comments from Davos. The New World Order, we don't need the US, we need to separate from the US, or us middle powers need to align and not give so much powers to the superpowers like the US. But his 17-minute address was literally ripping into the US for 11 years of terrible liberal policies. But he was blaming Trump and the US for all of our problems, basically. And Scott Bessent said that he walked back his comments. And when he called Trump, I guess he was a lot more polite than he was during his address. But there's a solution for this. Release the recordings. All those calls are recorded. We all know this. All those calls, at least they're supposed to be recorded, because they're done on business time, unless I guess they probably have provisions when it comes to security, if they think it's a threat to national security. But we all know they record those calls. We all know they are. So just release the recordings. If you did not walk it back, release the recording. I would love to hear them. I would actually listen to that conversation. But here's the truth. Here's the truth when it comes to this, at least in my opinion. What's the truth? It's all part of the game. It's all part of the game. You saw how they were when they met in the White House. The 2 times they met in the White House, they were all chummy. And you don't need to look far. Just look at when the last minister swore in, what was it, 6 months ago, maybe a bit more? No, it would have been a bit more, around when Mark Carney was selected as the Prime Minister of Canada. Harper was messing around with Trudeau. They were sitting close to each other. They were messing around, just like you saw Obama and Trump mess around. So to me, this whole he said, she said is just for the show. It is just for the masses. It is just for us, the commoners, to believe that they don't work together. Because Trump gave the equivalent of an $80 billion contract to Westinghouse, which is owned by Brookfield. And we all know that Carney has a lot of interest in Brookfield. So they all do business together. I got a feeling that this is all theater to bring us closer to one country representing the whole Western Hemisphere. That to me is the goal. Yes, you can talk about the Club of Rome. You can talk about like we covered a lot over the past few weeks, the Monroe Doctrine, to say that it is the responsibility of the U.S. to defend the Western Hemisphere. Trump is getting access to Greenland. There's a deal through NATO that's going to be signed eventually. So to me, that all sounds, the more you look into it, the more it seems that we're going to end up with an American Union, something that looks like the EU. Yeah, exactly. Papa Mike, MD, you literally just said what I was going to say. North American Union. That is exactly how I see it. I keep on forgetting to watch Trevor Benson. You've been telling me for a while now to look at the United We Fall. I did not. Those are all thoughts that I always have. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when Rob is not around, I tend to go a lot more conspiracy theorists. I tend to talk about what I really believe a lot more. When Rob is around, I try to tone it down a bit because the point, you know, what I really enjoy when it comes to recording with Rob is that he is the people I'm trying to convince. So I've been creating content for 4 or 5 years now, and I'm always trying to change the mind of people that are ready to listen. The woke people out there, I cannot convince them that they're wrong. They're going to have to do that for themselves. But once they're ready to listen, I'll be there. But Rob's the perfect example because he is not woke anymore, but he's ready to listen. And over the past year, we've recorded what? I think this is the 247th episode of the Political Orphans. And you can see that his opinion is changing. So when he's around, I try not to go too much down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole. I try to keep it a little bit at a time. But man, it's very hard for me to for anybody out there. Is it that hard to believe that this is the intent? Question for you guys in the comment section. Question for the people that are not watching this live. Is it that hard to believe that the plan is to have a one world government? And obviously you can't align every single country overnight with one single banner. That's something that you're going to have to do over time. But wouldn't it make sense that one of the first steps would be to align North America all together? So to have Mexico, the US, Canada, and Greenland all part of the same country. Is that hard to believe? Not that hard, right? At least, what do you guys think? You tell me what you think, but to me, it all makes sense. Like, to me, it's been in the works for a very, very long time, but it takes time. And all we're seeing right now is just WWE for adults. We're just seeing guys doing what they do best, entertaining us and making us look at something when we should be looking at something else. And that's why I'm talking about, that's exactly why I'm talking about releasing the recording. Because if you want to prove, if Mark Carney wants to prove that he's not lying, release the recording. We'll see it for ourselves. And there's another thing that's going on right now, which it's one of those stories where what we're focusing on, if you look everywhere in mainstream media, if you look at most content creators, those conservative content creators out there, they're talking about what I just addressed, the Scott Bessent versus Mark Carney. But another thing that a conspiracy theorist like me is going to notice is every single time they make a big deal out of something, that's because they're hiding something in the back end. There's something that we're not supposed to be paying attention to. That story, in my opinion, and this needs to be confirmed because I have not been able to find a lot of sources for the story that I want to talk about right now, which this is technically not a new story. This story came out, I think, on January 16th, but it went pretty much under the radar until this post, the post that we're going to see right now, until this post came out. And the post is pretty simple. The post said that, well, it's reported that as of January 26th, the Liberals will be permanently deleting their private messages after 15 days and emails after 30. I don't know for you, but I'm not okay with that. I'm definitely not okay with that. This was reported, well, at least the post that you're seeing right now, which has almost 300,000 views on, was posted by an MP by the name of Jeremy Padzer. He's out of Saskatchewan. He's a Conservative MP. I did some research. I'm trying to find more information on this. I'm trying to get more sources to speak about this. And if you notice the post, I'm so used to going on Blacklock's Reporter that I recognize the bottom of the post, and it was this article right here. And like I said, this is nothing new. They posted about this on January 16th, so almost 2 weeks ago. And that's exactly what they were saying. Federal managers have issued new guidelines for concealing records effective January 26th, so that was 2 days ago, including permanent deletion of chat posts within 15 days. The policy follows Prime Minister Mark Carney's election pledge to access to information was quite important. So this came on 2 days ago. Is it a coincidence that the comments from Scott Bessent were made on the 26th, 2 days ago? Is that a coincidence? Are they trying to hide something? Because that's a big deal. Like, that is a massive deal. And this is not something that is common. I come from the telecommunication world, and you know, a lot of our customers, and I used to answer the phone. I started my career picking up the phone for a small telco, a small internet company, where I would talk to mom and pops to help them fix their internet over the phone. And one of the things, all those calls were recorded. Not only were those calls recorded, and we're talking like 20 years ago, not only are those calls recorded, but they're saved. They're saved for a very long time. We're talking at least a year or two. Today, it's probably a lot more. They probably never get erased now. So to have our government tell us that, well, they're not telling us. To have Blacklock Reporter tell us that the government passed a new policy, because I don't remember voting on that policy, that the Liberals are deleting their private message after 15 days and emails after 30. Obviously, they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want their actions to be scrutinized, so they want to be able to get rid of the evidence. And to me, that's part of the story that they're trying to cover. But there's another story that is going around, and funny enough, Blacklock's Reporter were the only one to report on it as well. All the sources that I'm seeing are pointing back to them. But here is the article from, I believe this was released yesterday, January 26th, no, 2 days ago, on the same day. So pretty interesting that on the 26th, they started deleting their texts after 15 days. That's the new policy, and 30 days for the emails. But here is the article also released on the 26th by Blacklock's Reporter saying, warn of democracy decay. Canada is witnessing a decline in democratic norms, and the rule of law says a law commission report findings were drawn from interviews with MPs and senior judges, lawyers, and scholars. Public institutions do not work unless they are reviewed and accountable. So they are saying that they are warning of a democratic decay. So I went on, obviously you guys know me, I do a lot of research, I read the bills, I read the articles, not just the articles, I read the reports, and I found the reports that Blacklock's Reporter was referring to. You can see it on the screen right now. It is issued, and this was issued by Law Commission of Canada. This, to give a bit of perspective, if you do not know who they are, the Law Commission of Canada is an independent, nonpartisan government agency that acts as a legal watchdog. Its role is to study the changing needs of society and give Parliament advice on how to reform and modernize the law to keep it fair and accountable. So it's all about accountable, right? You're going to see that pretty much the topic of now until our guests arrive in 6 minutes, it's all about transparency and accountable. If Carney wants to prove that he did not walk back his comments from Davos, show us the recording. New policy from the Liberal Party that are erasing their texts after 15 days and emails after 30 days. Turns out that the Law Commission came out with this report that you're seeing in front of you right now. And we can start right here. We're not going to go through the whole 13-page documents. There are just some places that I really want to highlight because the report is on a lot of different things. But this is regarding this report is covering July to December 2025. This is the 5th report that they've produced, but there's a bunch of little places that are worth talking about. So if you look under their first portion, preoccupations, rule of law and democracy, we are witnessing a general erosion of democratic norms of our economic system and rule of law. A wide range of actors have interest in this space, but there remain room for greater coordination and collaboration amongst them. We are witnessing a general erosion of democratic norms. That is not a good way to start. And here's the decay that Blacklock's reporter was talking about. A broad decline in civil literacy has acted as a driver of democratic decay, with a majority of countries falling in the World's Project Rules of Law Index. If people do not know why they should care about an issue, it is unlikely that they will. That is very, very true. Notice the people around you. If they don't know about something or they have no idea about a certain topic, they're not probably going to be interested in it. And right here, while public discourse regarding rule of law is predominantly focused abroad, Canada cannot afford to be complacent. We are not immune to the trends that threatened rule of law in other countries. There's other parts. I'm just going to check my notes here. So we're looking third point, page 5. Not poverty, page 5, right here. Third point, that is under meeting community needs. If populism is based on perceived division between the people and the elites, a self-perpetuating problem is created when institutions become interchangeable or associated with elites in public consciousness, fueling the resentment of those who feel left behind. Basically, they're showing a problem where individual populism is interchangeably using the word elites and our institutions. So to them, there's no difference because our institutions are run by the elite. They're ran by the elites. And keep in mind, this is a government. This is a third-party government. This is an organization that is technically governmental, but it is supposed to be unbiased third party. And that report is pretty damn bang on. There's another portion under project. I'm looking for trust and accountability. Trust and accountability right here. Public institutions do not work unless they are reviewed and accountable. A range of public and civil society actors is engaged in the work of review and accountability in a variety of forums. But this is the first part. Public institutions do not work unless they are reviewed and accountable. What are we talking about here? Carney's new policy is deleting emails and deleting texts. Does that sound that they're reviewed and accountable? This whole report is bang on the whole way through, is absolutely bang on. And there was another part, I forgot to take notes of it, but it was talking about how individuals no longer trust regular media, which can you really disagree with anything that they're saying right here? Civil society actors such as the Samara Center for Democracy and tracing the impacts from the decline in traditional or legacy media organization and the corresponding shift to social and other forms of new media, including the rise of disinformation and disinformation designed to disrupt democratic processes. Hard to disagree, isn't it? On one hand, we have Carney's new policy that is trying to get rid or will get rid of emails and texts. On the same day as that goes live, we have a report from the Law Commission of Canada stating that we are facing a lack of accountability. Is that the story they want to hide? Because again, we go back to what I said at the beginning. To me, it is all actors. What we're seeing, they're playing a game to try to hide what's actually going on. And could that be that report? Good question, isn't it? I do believe that it is, but we do have our guest for today that is joining us. I love when people are on time. Rob, you're ready to go? Thumbs up. Awesome. We are joined by former Calgary Conservative MP Rob Ambrose to speak about the Conservative convention taking place from tomorrow to Saturday. Mr. Rob Ambrose, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. We'll jump right into it. And because you're from Alberta, this is the reason why I wanted to have you on, because not only did you serve as an MP for almost 20 years, right? Like 1917. Well, there you go. Almost 20 years, but you're also in Alberta, which is exactly why I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm starting to see, we had a Jason Lavigne was on the show yesterday, and he kind of made a very interesting point about what's happening with the Conservative Party in Alberta. So that's why I wanted to have you on. And I'm going to start with I don't know if it's a simple question, but do you think it's a coincidence that the National Conservative Convention is taking place in Alberta this year?
No. I mean, I remember when I gave Pierre Poilievre his first job politically, which was working at the phone bank of the Reform Party when he was 14. So this is his home. His mother lives here. I bump into her at, political functions and what have you. He went out to take out David Pratt as the sitting Minister of National Defense, many years later type of thing. But this is where he got his start. Calgary is kind of, when you think about it, if you consider Pierre Poilievre a product of Calgary, and Stephen Harper, though he was from Etobicoke originally, and then Stockwell Day and Preston Manning, you've had at least a prime minister / leader of the opposition, 4 leaders of the opposition, in the last 20 years, in the last generation, that have kind of come out of here. So Quebec, Montreal is a hotbed of politics. And so you have a lot of prime ministers and premiers and whatever that gravitate out of there. I would say that Calgary and Alberta are like that in Western Canada. So if you want to represent the West or hold that base, it's here. And so it makes sense that the party would have its conventions out here because, after Toronto, Calgary clears the second largest amount of corporate paper in the country for financing private sector ventures. So it kind of makes sense.
The reason I'm asking is because obviously the Alberta independence movement is definitely gaining traction. Like, it is massive. We try to cover it every time that there's something that should be spoken about, because we know that the mainstream media is not going to give it not going to make it justice. It's not going to report on what's actually going on. And luckily enough, I know quite a few guys like Jason Lavigne that's on the street, that they get to speak to those people all the time, and they give a lot of speeches walking around. And the reason I was bringing that up is because we haven't seen, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what I could find, we haven't seen a convention, a national convention since 2023. Like, it's the first one in 3 years. And they're in Calgary right now at the same time as the independence movement in Alberta is gaining a lot of traction. So do you think this is on purpose? Because if I I see the Alberta independence movement as a death sentence for the Conservative Party. If that goes through, if 2027, you guys get your referendum and you're able to vote yourself out of Canada, we will never elect another Conservative Party in Canada. Not without Alberta.
Yeah, I think that's true because, like I said, Calgary is the epicenter of the oil patch, and Alberta has more pipelines than the rest of the country put together. And we're kind of a rising star economically type of thing. So when you look at the number of seats, Alberta's number of seats continues to go up and up, and it is the bedrock of the Conservative Party, both in terms of memberships and donations, etc. The leaders' dinners that happen here, the big barbecues, etc., the stampede. So if Alberta is to vote to leave, then it makes it very hard for the Conservatives to get the 50% plus one of the seats in the House of Commons to form a majority government. I have my own thoughts over what I think a nuanced position on this stuff is, and what I think we're aiming for. Do you want me to go into that?
Oh, 100%. This is the reason I wanted to talk to you, is that we can address both. You can address the federalist portion. You can address the province side, because you're both, right? You serve the government on the federal level.
Yeah.
And you're also an Albertan. So I was curious to actually ask you, which one are you? Are you a Canadian or are you an Albertan? Because most Albertan that I speak to right now, they're Albertans before they're Canadians. Just like in Quebec, most people you ask, they're not Canadian. They're Quebecois before they are Canadian. Do you feel the same? Are you Albertan or are you Canadian?
Yeah, I used to commiserate a lot with my Quebec colleagues in the House. Like, I'll tell stories here. Like, when I first got elected back in the 1990s for the Reform Party, the Bloc Québécois at that time, most of them were people who had been conservatives under Brian Mulroney, along with Lucien Bouchard. Gilles Duceppe had not taken over the party yet. He had not driven those people out and made it more left-wing. So Paul Crête and a lot of these guys, they were former Mulroney people. And my hallway in third floor of West Block was shared with these guys. I would bump into them at all sorts of things and talk on committee, etc. And one of the things they always used to say to me was, why the hell does Alberta put up with Ottawa? Like, Quebec, we do our own pensions, we do, our own corporate tax collection, etc. Like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Why do you guys capitulate and keep on giving your money to Ottawa type of thing? And they were right. And for a lot of us in Alberta, we feel like with our transfer payments, etc., we've been subsidizing socialism in the rest of the country. And it's not just money out of our pocket, but it's actually detrimental to the rest of the country, because you have these various places that think, oh, well, it's okay to live on the dole or whatever, right? And
Quebec.
Well, but it's everywhere. Like, unfortunately, it's happened just about everywhere in the country. It's not just Quebec. But let me talk about the things that I think Quebec has done right, and that I think Alberta is going to piggyback on, and we should have done a long time ago. So one of them, for example, Quebec collects its own corporate taxes, right? Yeah. If Alberta did that, it would be to the tune of about $8 billion a year, right? So that's $8 billion that would stay here in Alberta rather than go to Ottawa and be redistributed, et cetera, whatever. Another issue is the pensions. Albertans contribute about $3 billion more per year into CPP and the pensions, old age security, et cetera, than we get back. So that's another $3 billion. Now you're talking $11 billion. If you talk employment insurance, because we have a younger demographic, we have a higher employment rate, a lower unemployment rate, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're talking hundreds of millions. You add that all together, let's say it's about $12 billion. So it's fairly significant. So those are things that we would like to do, and it makes sense if Quebec's already paved the way on these things that we go that way as well. Quebec has the case de depot. It's got its own thing going on in the Ontario Provincial Police, etc. Blah blah blah. Alberta had an Alberta Provincial Police Force from 1916 to 1932, because during the First World War there had been the Northwest Mounted Police, but then the federal government wanted to focus on the war effort, and so left that to the provinces. And then when the Great Depression came along, 32, took it back. But we had a very successful police force from 1916 to 1932. It was actually more successful than the Northwest Mounted Police had been. 85% patchover rate for cops that decided to go from the Northwest Mounted Police to the Alberta Provincial Police. So that's something we're seriously pursuing, or I should be anyhow. That contract will be ended any March 31st type of thing, and takes effect 2 years later. Then Quebec and Manitoba have both been ahead of Alberta in terms of seeking more input on immigration. Not just taking whatever Ottawa says, is the way to go. Quebec, wants to have people who speak French and fit in with their culture. Manitoba likes farmers, particularly Mennonites. There's a lot of Mennonite farmers in Manitoba, and you take them in from Uruguay and Paraguay and these various places, Mexico, etc. Whatever, so we could have more control over immigration. So those are the things that Alberta and Quebec already agree on, and that in a sense Alberta would just be following in the footsteps of Quebec would. And then there's a few other issues that I think Quebec would be very amenable to. Okay, so one of them, say for example, is environmental regulations, right? Quebec doesn't want Ottawa telling them that they can't do Hydro-Quebec and they can't build an extra dam or whatever. They get upset about that, rightfully so. It's their territory. Why should Ottawa intervene in that type of thing? So if Quebec wants to have its mineral rights, as the West, with Ernest Manning, etc., fought for our mineral rights, for our oil rights, Quebec wants to say, okay, we want to build a dam, and we don't want the federal government telling us we can't. Similarly, Alberta wants to build a pipeline, whether it's down to Montana or what have you. Let us alone. I would even go so far as to say if Quebec makes a private arrangement with Newfoundland, Labrador, or New Brunswick, or Ontario, and both those provinces, or a series of those provinces, are okay with it, tell Ottawa to stay the hell out of it, right? And Alberta would be the same way. Say, if we had a deal with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, to go up to James Bay or Churchill or whatever for getting out natural gas, or to go through British Columbia or Yukon and Northwest Territories, we're same deal. Leave Ottawa out of it, right? If we can get agreement between these other territories, provincial territories, to do it, then Ottawa can do something else, focus on something else. Another issue is judges. We have a number of judges in the province of Alberta that are selected by the federal government to operate here in Alberta. I think Quebec would be very amenable to saying that they would get more control over selecting their judges in Quebec that are adjudicating on federal law, etc., whatever. And I think Alberta would agree. There would be a lot of symbiosis on that. I think if Alberta and Quebec agree that we want to have more power to select our judges, federal judges in our provinces, I think if Alberta and Quebec see eye to eye on that, I think Ontario, who sees itself as kind of the center, the glue, the parent, the whatever of Confederation, would say, well, if it's something that makes Quebec and Alberta happy, and it keeps Alberta and Quebec here, whatever, within the Confederation, let's do it. So I think that's also another one. Also, in terms of firearms, when you drive your motor vehicle, motor vehicles are licensed and dealt with by the province in the British North America Act, or the Canadian Constitution Act as it is now. That's something that's private property. And so in Quebec or Alberta, whatever you're dealing with in terms of your car and licensing, that's done by the province. Well, that was the same way with guns, firearms. So if you go back to, say, around World War I, when provinces were just starting to get into the idea of licensing handguns because they were worried about the Winnipeg General Strike in 1919 and the communist Tim Buck threat in the 1930s and all this type of stuff. The provinces, some of the provinces anyhow, Alberta didn't, but certainly British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario. I'm not sure about Quebec, but somebody there would know the situation there better than I. But they issued their own gun licenses. It was considered a provincial jurisdiction. But somehow we allowed the federal government to intrude on these things.
It's federal, by the way. I'm a gun owner in Quebec. It's federal still.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's the thing is that it used to be the British.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
The Constitution, right? The Constitution actually has it as a provincial authority. It's not a federal authority in the Constitution; it's a provincial authority. Like the feds have control over criminal code stuff, which is interesting in the case of Quebec because of the Napoleonic Code, right? So once again, doing something a little bit differently. And then, but in terms of the licensing of guns, that was something that belonged in the purview of the provinces and was so historically and is so constitutionally. So that's something that if Quebec and Alberta agree on and say, we want to do our own thing on guns. Now, I think it's fair to say that in Quebec, you probably have a few more people in the gun grabber column than what we do in Alberta.
Well, there's a registry on the Quebec side, right? There is a provincial gun registry in Quebec that you were supposed to register your firearms a few years back. That being said, most of the gun grabbers from the Polytechnique are from Quebec, obviously. But to go back to the question I asked you, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me that you're from Alberta, but you want Alberta to stay within Canada. Is that what I'm hearing from what you're saying?
Here's what I want to do. I want Alberta to have all the things that Quebec has in terms of its own sovereignty, maître chez nous, master in your own house, et cetera, right? I want all that. And then I want some other things, right? Whether it comes to environmental regulations on pipelines, selection of judges, firearms policy. I want that to be more provincial, more Alberta than it is Ottawa. And I frankly think there's a lot of people in Quebec that would agree with that. So I think that now that's my headspace. That's where I want to see this go. And if the federal government, if Carney, whoever, says no, we don't like that. In other words, Alberta can't have the things that Quebec has, or the federal government isn't going to allow Alberta and Quebec to have these other three issues in terms of environmental stuff, judges, and firearms policy. Well, then at that stage, you say, well, you know what? That's too bad. This has been a workable relationship for a few hundred years, type of thing. 100 years in our case, longer in Quebec's case. And you say, but you know what? It's not working for us. So let's rejig this. And at that stage, do you go your own way? Do you reconfederate and say we're setting this up on a different set of rules? Do you look at the American Constitution and say, okay, are there things that could be tweaked, right? Like when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and also the Ecumenical Constitution for the state of Virginia, which later turned into the U.S. Constitution. He got a lot of things right. But if you do it again 250 years later, you might say, well, rather than say we believe in the pursuit of happiness, we believe in the pursuit of private property. Or maybe you might say no government can tax more than 10%. It's what Rome imposed as the heaviest tax on Carthage in ancient times, and it's what the Bible recognizes as 10% is good enough for God, as tithing, it's good enough for government. So there's various things that you could do to tweak it and say, let's take these things that have been around for a couple hundred years, and we now have seen them in operation for a while. How do we make that even better? So I see it as a real opportunity.
So basically, that's one of the things that Jason was talking about, because obviously he's for Alberta independence. I think Alberta should be independent too. I understand why they would want to. Obviously, it's a lot better for Canada if they don't, but I understand why they would. And one of the things he was saying yesterday is that if you look at the signatures that they're collecting, you guys only need like 177,000, give or take, in order to be able to move forward with a referendum to actually ask the question. But Jason was saying that the real goal is like 1 million, to make it such an impact, to say you can't deny us. You can't say that this is not happening. You can't say that there's an appetite for this in Alberta. And he also mentioned that if it does get to 1 million, that could make happen what you're talking about there. If they have a million signature, that's Ottawa needs to pay attention to this, because now they're really looking at a province that could potentially leave. Your cash cow might leave the country, and maybe then they would be ready to negotiate. So is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure I understand you.
And beyond just the optics, there's also a very obvious political operative thing to this, which is that if I need 177,000 signatures and I get 178,000, okay, I crossed the threshold, fine. However, but then comes the referendum, and if you want to win the referendum, well, then you have to get 50% plus one. So then don't just shoot for 178,000, shoot for 1 million, because that way you already have an established voter identification list, in a sense, that you can go to later, and you can say, hey, you supported us before, here's the reasons you did, et cetera, whatever. Red Rover, we're calling you over, vote for us, etc. So it's like a form of voter identification, right? You're building up your list, your voter ID, heading into that campaign. So it satisfies not only an optics thing and a momentum thing, but also a very tangible, practical voter identification and get out the vote strategy.
Do you think, because again, I'm going to go back to my main assumption is that that's exactly why the Conservative Convention is taking place in Alberta, because they're trying to somehow change the mind, if you will, of the Alberta independence. Like there's even an event with a bunch of content creators, like the biggest conservative, and I'm air quoting here, conservative content creators that are taking place right next to where the convention is. And we all know Pierre Poilievre's going to show up because there's going to be a lot of their base there. The same people that are always supporting him are going to be there. And this, to me, it's all that's happening right now. They're trying to, I don't know if crush is the proper term, but kind of help die down the independence movement that's going on in Alberta, because a conservative knows it's a death sentence. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, the reason Alberta's so frustrated is that we haven't had a real conservative government in a very long time, even a real conservative party for a very long time. I'm not going to assume to know what you think of Pierre Poilievre, but in my opinion, he's a liberal. He's a right-leaning liberal, but he's closer to a classical liberals from 30, 40 years ago. He ain't a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. Like he is not a real pro-gun guy. He's not somebody that's religious. He's not somebody that's pro-life. He doesn't even have the balls to say that women don't have penises. He has to juggle very simple questions in order to keep his optic. That, to me, are all things that small government is another thing that real conservatives believe in. But do you think that that's the reason why Alberta's happening right now? Because we haven't seen a real conservative party in a very long time, and we're led by liberals, because no matter where I look, I see liberals. I spend half of my time in the US. There's nowhere they keep on calling Pierre Poilievre a MAGA. I'm like, hey, you don't understand what a Republican is, because there's no such thing in Canada. Our Overton window is all the way to the left. Every party in Canada, outside of maybe the PPC, which the PPC is middle ground in my opinion, because I'm way more conservative than the PPC. But is that the reason why Alberta independence is even a movement right now? Because we don't have real conservatives in Canada anymore.
Well, I think Albertans are just getting fed up with Ottawa and with the status quo. Like, I'll give you an example. Danielle went to Carney and tried to negotiate this deal with regard to pipelines getting out to the West Coast, etc. And she brought it back to the Conservative Convention, the UCP convention. I was there. And the mood of the crowd was very owly. They didn't applaud it. They didn't embrace it, because they knew that you can't trust Ottawa with regard to pipelines. You can't trust the Liberals with regard to pipelines. And so she announced it, made some fanfare about it, tried to, pump it up and give it some hope and, momentum and whatever. And the crowd booed and hissed because, I'm just going to talk about my board, for example. Like the riding that I represented in Calgary West, about half of my board were oil and gas people over my 18 years. They were either petroleum engineers or they were petroleum landmen or, they were accountants or, whatever, but they were all oil patch, right? It's the bread and butter of Calgary. And so they know, they can smell if you say, oh, hey, we've got a deal, go pipeline, liberals, they can read, they can smell bullshit. And so, they know that if David Eby, as the Premier of British Columbia, is already fundraising amongst his base, his NDP supporters, to say, "Don't worry, I'm going to kill it, even if Carney says it's going to go through. It ain't happening on my watch as Premier of BC." Albertans know, Calgarian oil patch people know. You can't bullshit them on that. So they see through that and they just boot her about it, right? So I think Albertans are growing cynical and skeptical. They don't like what came out of Ottawa in terms of what happened to the truckers and the convoys and the jabs and the lockdowns and, the gun grabbing. And I mean, I had a conversation and sit down with Danielle and her rail car restaurant, during the summer. And we talked about this type of stuff because, we've known each other a long time going back in politics. And, Albertans, they've just grown tired. I think they've had their fill, and when people are trying to shut down their industry, it provides the jobs, and Danielle and I both agreed that Mark Carney is his own worst enemy, right? Because if he just laid low, left Alberta alone. Didn't push the gun grabs, cut some taxes, whatever, it'd probably be fine. Like, in other words, if he was Paul Martin, if he just said, "I'm not going to push your buttons and I'm going to cut some taxes," Alberta would be like, okay. But if you rattle the saber of, "I'm going to grab your guns and I'm not going to compensate for them," et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and by the way, I want to, and this is Carney literally saying this, I want to spend 150 trillion with a T on the green agenda, and I want to shut down gas or whatever. You can only push people so far before they say, "We don't like this arrangement," and we want to go. Like I remember having conversations with the Liberals when Milliken was Speaker, when they were still government before Martin went down, and the whole sponsorship scandal, stuff came up. And they were trying to spin me. They were trying to say, "Oh, well, it was just a few million here and there, maybe 100 million, not a big deal, blah, 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 et cetera." And I said to them, if you guys get reelected after this, I said, what's going to come out of Alberta as elected people, I mean, the ones that are going to come, it's going to make me and Myron Thompson look like a strawberry festival. And what you've had going on with Quebec, right? I said, it's going to make that look tame, right? I said, so like, you guys deserve to go down, and the country needs to clean this stuff up. And so I think Albertans have just got to the point now where they're just fed up.
Yeah, they're frustrated. I think that's the best term I could use to describe it. I'm not Albertan. I just know a lot of Albertans. I'm luckily enough that with what I do, I get to speak with a lot of the big voices out of Alberta, and I just feel the frustration, and it's something I know. Again, I'm gonna say that best case scenario, Alberta stays in Canada, but I also understand why they want to separate. But at the same time, there's a part of me that wants Alberta to separate. I want Quebec to separate because I want Canada to realize that we are very different. There are very different people living in Canada, and we've grown apart. This is not the Canada I grew up in. I'm 43 years old, and this is not my Canada. I can't even imagine somebody that's 70 or 80 years old. And we are seeing ourselves going down a pathway that, like I said, even our conservatives are liberal. Like, we don't have anybody that seems to believe in Canadian values anymore. Like, what it meant to be Canadians, to be a tough... People don't understand. My family's been in Canada for at least 300 years on both sides. Those guys were badasses. Those guys came to a country with no technology, lived in minus 40s in the winters and some plus 35 in the summers, and they had to fight bears. Like, we're talking black powder gun. We're not talking semi-automatic or 308. We're not talking about 338 Lupa here. We're talking about black powder gun. We are tough as nails. We're used to depend on each other, but we lost that identity. We do not, like, our culture is down the drain. That's why I think we need a real conservative movement that is ready to speak about this, to bring it back to what Canada used to be. I want to believe that it's still possible, but with the amount of mass immigration that we're seeing in Canada, and considering that most of the kids that are, like, a lot of the kids that are being born right now, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but a vast majority of them are not, they're born from parents that are not, that weren't from Canada. So they're not Canadians, in my opinion. Why is it so hard for conservatives to understand that? And I'm talking conservatives with a big C, because in my opinion, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, a guy like Pierre Poilievre does not speak about this. He doesn't speak about the problems that are really frustrating people in Alberta. But that's not just in Alberta. There's a lot of people that thinks like Alberta in Quebec, like me, for example, that's very frustrated. I left for almost 3 years, and when I came back last year, I did not recognize this country. I'm like, what the hell happened over the past 3 years? Because during COVID, I went to the woods. I had a house in the middle of nowhere, so I left my place in the city, got rid of it, moved there. So for 5 years, I did not see the real Canada because I'm not vaccinated, so I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And when I got back into civilization, I don't recognize my country. 5 years, I don't recognize it. And the conservatives are acting like nothing's happening. They're not talking about the real issues that conservatism is supposed to be about. And I don't know what it's going to take for us to bring it back. I don't know. Do you think Poilievre has a chance to lose his leadership over the weekend? Because that's what the National Convention is. One of the big aspects is because he lost the election, he has a leadership review. Do you think it's even possible for him to lose his seat at this point?
Well, there's a bunch of us who talk about this in the background type of thing.
Sure.
And how this goes down is as follows. There's always kind of a battle inside parties, just like the Liberals had the Chrétien Martin battles. The Conservatives traditionally had the, Joe Clark, Brian Mulroney, tiffs, etc. I was somebody who signed a petition amongst former members of Parliament to have Aaron O'Toole step aside because I felt that he was way down the path of political correctness and globalism or whatever with regard to lockdowns and masks and, etc. And so the people who supported Pierre Poilievre were less that way, and I think more populist, if I can call it that, more freedom oriented. The Reds inside the party, I think, would love to pull a shiv on Pierre. That's how this goes. But that being said, I don't think there's a clear contender. There's not a one name, a force that they can rally around per se. And for those people that feel that Pierre is not as right wing or conservative or whatever, like you've expressed, the thing that we say to those people is, okay, who's your guy? Who's the candidate? Who do you have? And there, once again, there doesn't appear to be a clear name that resonates to have people rally around like that. So, I guess the thing is the party could do a lot worse. I think that with Aaron O'Toole, he was less independently minded with regard to COVID, lockdowns, masks, etc., whatever. A lot of the questions that the party was asking in question period under Aaron O'Toole was, why aren't we getting the jabs and the vaccines fast enough? It's like, really? Anyhow.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we all do. So that was pretty sad. So I think Pierre will come out of this. He took over the seat here in Alberta. I think he will survive any type of leadership review, etc. And then the question comes, because there was an opportunity to take down the Carney government earlier. And
November 7th.
Yep. And I've said to people he may regret not doing that, because you had this Michael Ma character who's crossed the floor to take the trip to China with Mr. Carney. I'm sure the Communist Party of China was quite happy about all that, and felt they lost their man inside the Conservative caucus and went to have them support their golden boy with Carney and central bank digital currency. But anyhow, lots of subversion and foreign interference that goes on in these things. But anyhow, so with that, as they inch closer to a majority, well, then all of a sudden you don't have the ability to take Carney down in the spring over a budget vote, and he could carry on for a few years. And I believe he is a globalist. I believe he's more of an environmentalist than he is a central banker per se. And he's, he's one of the brainchild, figures for central bank digital currency. And I don't think people fully understand just how controlling that will be. Imagine if every single government check and everything else that comes out is issued in a form of a digital currency, and that everything is trackable, et cetera. I don't think people fully grasp yet how controlling and whatever that is, right? So
they definitely don't.
So I think Pierre will come out the victor of the weekend's deliberations, just because I don't think there's a clear red option or a clear blue other option, and I think people feel that he came close. That if it hadn't been for the elbows up and the tariffs and various things, that Pierre would have probably cruised to a majority government. So we'll see. I think he's going to get a pass this weekend, and then we'll see what happens over a spring budget vote.
That is such a weak answer. Not from you, but a weak reason to support Pierre Poilievre, because Donald Trump got the same thing. They swapped Biden at the last minute for Kamala Harris. He was leading by 20 points, just like Pierre Poilievre was leading by about 20 points against Trudeau. The only difference is that Trump actually had the balls to do interviews. Trump had the balls to go on podcasts, to go on Joe Rogan. People don't understand that's the biggest podcast on the planet. Don't tell me that does not have an actual impact. And Pierre Poilievre was invited on the Joe Rogan podcast. Pierre Poilievre was invited on Patrick Bet-David, massive podcast. I understand why he didn't go on Alex Jones, because that could be as bad as it is good, but he had the opportunity. He had the blueprint on how to win the election, and he didn't follow it. He just sat back and decided not to speak. And I got words from the inside that he was also telling his people not to do podcasts, not to do interviews during the election process, the election campaign, so that nothing bad would come out of it. So I just find it so weak all around. When you look at everything he hasn't done over the past 20 years, I don't understand how that guy's a leader. It blows my mind. And yeah, I don't understand. I really don't get. The only person that I could see that I particularly like, but I don't know her, is Leslyn Lewis, just because she speaks against the censorship bills, which I talk about all the time. She's the biggest voice about it. But even the people like Andrew Lawton, for example, I made a video calling him out today because he's bragging about how they put a pause to C-9 for 2 weeks. I'm like, are you kidding me? Who cares about bail reform when the government is trying to take away our free speech by inventing the term of hatred and putting it in the criminal code? And I could face 5, 10, 15 years in prison for insulting a blue-haired liberal. So they're trying to tell me that bail reform is more important than free speech? Yet no. This is the problem with the Conservatives. This is my biggest gripe, is that they don't address the real problem. They're playing the same games the Liberals. They're trying to win over the Liberals for some reason when they're never going to vote for them, instead of doing the right thing and be Conservatives. But I know we're running out of time. I just want to ask you one single question before we end, because there's a lot of Conservatives and big C conservative here that keep on talking about an election, a spring election. Somebody told me today, they don't care about C9 really because they're going to be a spring election. I'm like, what the hell are you guys smoking? Why do people believe that there's going to be a spring election?
Well, because you have a budget vote. So let's say, for example, the Liberals table a budget in April, and then the budget gets voted on late April, early May, whatever. If it fails as a confidence vote, then you could see a potential election May, June, whatever, right?
So
That is,
like what Pierre Poilievre should have done on November 7th, which by
well,
backing the Bloc Québécois and the NDP with the Bloc's amendment to the Liberal budget, but instead voted for the Liberals in order for them to stay in power.
yeah,
So
I've said to people that he may live to regret that because that was his moment. And if you don't seize the moment when you have it, and then you have a Michael Ma or whoever that switches and it changes the numbers, then your opportunity is gone. And so I think he realizes he may have missed the moment on that. But to tie into what you were saying earlier, a real Canadian problem is that we're too timid, too cautious, and not edgy and wedgy enough. And that certainly is a problem for the conservative movement in Canada. I mean, I cut my teeth on American politics in Oklahoma and have campaigned in Virginia and, all sorts of different U.S. states, Missouri, Arizona, Nevada, etc., California. So I've worked in Virginia. I've done a bunch of New Hampshire, whatever, Iowa. And so there's just there's something about that freedom of speech
yep.
and also gun rights, that gives the Americans. I mean, the Republican Party is the epitome of the United States. The Democrats in the United States could just as well be some sort of social democrat liberals in Europe, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah. They don't define the United States. The Republican Party is what defines, the United States of America and what it means to the world in terms of freedom of speech and gun rights and all these things. And it's edgier and wedgier and just bolder. Barry Goldwater used to talk about flying a banner of bold colors rather than, pastels, and Canada needs more of that. The conservative movement in Canada needs more of that.
Yeah, they need more guys that are ballsy, that will talk about that will say what needs to be said and not apologize for it. It often makes me think that we need a guy like Trump. Not saying that Trump is a great president or anything. I'm just saying that he's the man for the situation. If you look at what's happening in the US, they needed a guy like him after what happened with Biden. They needed a man like him to kind of swing that conservative back into the US. And I think we need the same thing in Canada. We need somebody that's gonna fuck shit up and not gonna be apologizing for doing it, so that we can get that pendulum swinging back to at least the middle. Because man, everywhere I look in Canada, it's leftist policies. It's all liberal policies, no matter if they're in blue or they're in red. It's all liberal policies I see everywhere. I don't see any common sense anymore.
Yeah, like one of the things I noticed, because there's this conservative political action conference that happens in the U.S. every year around the Washington area. Sometimes it's Arlington, Virginia. Other times it's Baltimore, Maryland. But anyhow, it's like 10,000 conservative activists from across the United States to gather at these things, and I've been to many of them. And what you'll see is, Trump was there. He would attend year after year after year. But, if he'd come after some of the various candidates that there were for president, it wouldn't have worked. But because Roger Stone, who was savvy about this, had him wait until after Obama, Biden, it was the perfect timing, because you had these people who were so left, so woke, so liberal, so politically correct, that the antidote to that was Donald Trump, right?
Yeah,
and
my
so
point exactly.
It was the perfect time. He wouldn't have been the guy the party would have chose post Reagan, for example, or whatever. No. But it was the perfect time, and Roger Stone understood that. And Trump's a boat rocker. He's a guy who upsets the apple cart, and those are the guys that really make the big changes. I remember a story about Ronald Reagan when the air traffic controllers went on strike, and he fired them. And he brought in the U.S. Air Force to look after air traffic in the United States. And it was a ballsy move. And people in the Kremlin saw that and said a normal politician wouldn't have done that. A normal politician would have capitulated, would have given them a salary increase, would have met some of their demands, etc. And Reagan was basically, no, I'm going to fire your asses, and we're going to hire some other people in, and your job security's gone. Kiss it goodbye. And the Soviets paid attention to that. They said, hold on a second. This isn't your typical guy. If he says he means business, he means business. And, you know, like some of the business guys that I've seen in politics, like I used to sit down with Senator Braley in East Block cafeteria, and that guy had great ideas. He owned the Tiger Cats and the Argonauts, and he had great ideas with regard to how to downsize and get rid of the Federal Business Development Bank and all that type of stuff. Those are the types of guys who come in, upset apple carts, you know, et cetera, rock the boat, get her done. And that's Donald Trump. He's got a big checklist, and it's all about getting her done.
No matter what people think, and that's what we need, and that's what I'm not seeing in Canada. I'm not seeing it anywhere. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think it's going to have to get worse before it gets better, before we actually see that person rise. And yeah, Rob, great conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. I don't know if you're going to the convention over the weekend, but
that's the plan.
That's the plan. It's going to be, I hope Poilievre lose, but I don't see it happening. I don't see it.
The question is to be replaced by who or what? And I just don't see
Leslyn
that.
Lewis? Leslyn Lewis is the only person I could see replacing him.
See, the thing about Leslyn is because she's a black woman, she can get away with saying things that otherwise, if I said them, for example, I'd be pilloried by the CBC.
100%.
The friends of the CBC would, you know, be losing their minds if Rob Ambrose said some of the stuff, right? So that's the great thing about being a black woman in politics is, you know, you got a lot more leeway, right? Yeah.
That's my point exactly. Plus, she's a good-looking woman. She's very well spoken. She knows how to get her point across. She's standing up to censorship bills the way, at least at a minimum, should be done. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that she's a black woman because, again, the woke is going to hate her, but they can't.
Right.
They cannot go.
Right. It's
100%. I absolutely love it.
I remember when we had Stephen Fletcher inside our caucus, who, you know, was a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And I said to Harper, I said, put him on the health file, right? He can do anything. He can do anything on the health file. And the Liberals can't say boo because this is a guy who's a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. He can say, like, what, you think I don't understand healthcare? Right? He could do anything.
Yeah. And this is exactly how I see Leslyn Lewis too. So you read my mind. This is exactly what I like, the potential about her. Because I don't know if it's there or not, but the potential is at least a possibility. So Rob, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. And yeah, we'll definitely, I definitely want to have you back on. So we'll make sure it happens. But thanks again and enjoy the convention over the weekend.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, eh? Have a good one.
Absolutely.
All right, bye.
Guys, here we are. Another episode of the Political Orphans is done. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation with Rob. It was the first time having him on the show, but I did get the chance to speak about him on one of our mashups. So yeah, I'm loving those conversations. I'm loving being able to dig into more, and it's always interesting to see somebody that's more politically correct than I am trying to explain to me what's wrong with the Conservative Party. So yeah, guys, as Glenn B2 is saying, spank that like button. I completely agree. I absolutely agree. So hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. You've enjoyed all the conversations we've been having lately, all the topics that we're talking about that you don't see anywhere else. So if you guys enjoy what we do, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share wherever possible. If you want to support the show, there is a QR code at the top left of your screen. You can choose to buy us a coffee. You can become a member on the YouTube channel. But at the end of the day, all I want, all Rob wants is for you guys to keep showing up, filling in that comment section, letting us know how you feel, and to have that civil discourse. I could see today people were arguing, and you know, I like to see arguments. I like to see people argue, because at the end of the day, if everybody's in agreement, it's a how do you call it? It's oh wow, I'm losing my words. it is an echo chamber. I don't want an echo chamber. I want people to be able to argue. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the likes. Make sure you share. And we will see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We do have another guest. We have two guests tomorrow at 7:30. And yeah, I'm gonna tell you tomorrow who they are, but they're gonna be they're coming here to talk about a new documentary that's being released called The Shot. It's not out yet, but it will be released soon. The trailer is, you can find it on the YouTube. The Shot, the person that produced it and the person that wrote it are going to be with us tomorrow, 7:30. So we will see you there. Until then, have a good night, guys. Until tomorrow.